The Apache warrior's command to get inside shattered everything Sarah had been taught to believe about enemies and saviors as she clutched her infant son and faced the approaching raiders. With death galloping toward her isolated cabin, the trembling widow had seconds to decide: trust the man her people called savage, or die clinging to her fear. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. Between the grey sky and the endless plain, Sarah Mitchell stared at the horizon with tired eyes. The vastness of Montana territory seemed to swallow her a little more each day since she had buried William 3 months ago. The cold autumn wind of 1873 whipped across her face as she clutched little James to her chest, protecting him with a worn shawl that no longer offered the warmth it once did. The cabin that William had built with such pride now looked like a lonely island in an ocean of golden grass and melancholy. The roof needed repairs, the corral fence was broken, and supplies were dwindling faster than Sarah could replenish them. At 23, she was alone with a 4-month-old baby in a land that did not forgive the weak. "Come on, James," she whispered, adjusting her sleeping son against her shoulder. "We need to gather more firewood before the storm arrives." Sarah tied the baby against her chest with a wide piece of cloth, as she had learned from a Mexican woman who had passed through the property in summer. With her hands free, she grabbed the axe and walked to the small grove less than half a mile from the cabin. Her steps were heavy, dragged down by the exhaustion of sleepless nights and days of constant work. As she collected fallen branches and cut smaller ones, she couldn't help but feel that sensation again. Someone was watching her. For the past few days, this invisible presence had followed her like a shadow. It wasn't threatening, but it was there, as real as the dark clouds gathering on the horizon. She turned abruptly, scanning the edge of the grove with attentive eyes. Nothing, just the whisper of wind through the trees and the occasional chirp of a bird. Still, Sarah knew she wasn't alone. "Who's there?" she asked, her voice firmer than she felt. The axe weighed in her right hand, an inadequate protection against the dangers that the frontier hid. Silence was her only answer. Sarah took a deep breath and continued her work, faster now, piling the firewood into a bundle she could barely carry back. That's when she noticed, near a tree where she had been minutes before, a dead rabbit lay on a flat stone, fresh, clean, deliberately placed there. It wasn't the first time. For the past 2 weeks, small offerings mysteriously appeared: a rabbit, some wild berries, a freshly caught fish. Sarah never saw who left them, but she had her suspicions. The nearest settlers were a full day's journey away. It couldn't be them. With her heart racing, she gathered her load and the rabbit, heading back to the cabin with hurried steps. The sky was darkening rapidly, and the first raindrops were beginning to fall. That's when she saw him for the first time. He stood a few yards from the entrance to her cabin, tall, imposing, with black hair tied in a long braid. His posture was that of a warrior, but he wielded no weapons. An Apache, Sarah realized with a shiver that wasn't entirely from fear. James began to whimper, bothered by the rain that now fell harder. Sarah froze in place, unable to move forward, unable to retreat. The man's eyes met hers, dark, deep, unreadable. He slowly raised his hand and pointed to the western horizon. His tense face communicated urgency. Then, with a deep voice that seemed to come from the depths of the earth, he spoke the first words Sarah would hear from those lips. "Get inside, before it's too late." The rain now fell in torrents, transforming silence into noise. Sarah trembled, from cold, from fear, from an emotion she couldn't name. And as thunder tore through the sky above them, she realized that this moment, this man, would change everything she thought she knew about friends and enemies, about danger and salvation. Sarah clutched James tighter against her chest, her mind racing with conflicting instincts. The Apache's words echoed in her ears as rain pelted her face. Every story she'd heard from settlers, every warning whispered in hushed tones at the trading post, told her to run. But where? The closest neighbors were the Hendersons, a full day's ride away. The Apache took a step closer, and Sarah flinched. He stopped immediately, his face softening for just a moment. He gestured again toward the horizon, more urgently this time. "Raiders," he said, the English word sounding rough on his tongue. "Coming!" As if to emphasize his point, the distant sound of thunder rolled across the plains. Only it wasn't thunder, Sarah realized with growing dread. It was hoofbeats. Decision made, Sarah nodded and rushed past him toward the cabin, her arms full of firewood and the precious rabbit. The Apache followed at a respectful distance, his movements silent despite the mud forming beneath their feet. Once inside, Sarah quickly placed James in his wooden cradle before dropping the firewood beside the hearth. Her hands shook as she slid the heavy wooden bar across the door. "The shutters," the Apache said, already moving to secure the window on the west wall. His English was basic, but clear enough. Sarah hurried to the other window, pulling the wooden shutters closed and securing the latch. The cabin darkened, save for the dim light of the dying fire. She added wood to the flames, stealing glances at the stranger in her home. He stood tall against the wall, peering through a small gap in the shutters. "Who are they?" Sarah asked, keeping her voice low as she moved to check on James. The Apache turned to her, his face grave. "Bad men. Not my people. Not yours." He made a cutting motion across his throat. "They kill everyone. Take everything." A chill ran down Sarah's spine that had nothing to do with the cold. Stories of brutal raids had reached even their remote homestead. William had dismissed them as exaggerations, but Sarah had always feared there was truth in those tales of merciless outlaws who preyed on isolated settlements. "Why? Why help me?" Sarah managed to ask, the question that had burned in her mind since finding the first offering weeks ago. The man was silent for a long moment, as if weighing how much to say or perhaps searching for the right words. Finally, he pointed to James. Child should not be alone. His eyes, when they met hers, held a depth of emotion that startled her. Woman also. Before Sarah could respond, the sound of hoofbeats grew louder. The Apache motioned for her to stay low and moved silently to the other side of the cabin. He pointed to her husband's rifle mounted above the fireplace. Sarah hesitated only briefly before retrieving it, checking that it was loaded as William had taught her. "My name is Sarah," she whispered, feeling a strange need to establish something human between them in this moment of danger. "Sarah Mitchell." The Apache glanced at her, a flicker of surprise crossing his features. He touched his chest, lightly. "Nahuel," he replied. The name carried on a breath so quiet she almost missed it. Outside, the riders slowed their approach. Through the gap in the shutters, Sarah caught glimpses of 5 men, rough-looking, heavily armed, their faces obscured by bandanas pulled up over their noses. They weren't wearing uniforms, neither blue nor gray, just mismatched clothing caked with dust and darker stains she didn't want to identify. The leader, a burly man with a shock of red hair visible beneath his hat, raised his hand to halt the others about 50 yards from the cabin. They sat on their horses in the pouring rain, surveying the property. "Looks abandoned," one of them called out, his voice barely audible through the storm. The red-headed man shook his head. "Smoke from the chimney. Someone's home." Inside, Nahuel moved silently across the cabin floor to Sarah's side. He took the rifle gently from her trembling hands and whispered, "Hide with child, under bed." Sarah wanted to protest, to insist that this was her home to defend, but the fierce protectiveness in Nahuel's eyes silenced her objections. With James cradled in her arms, She slid beneath the rough-hewn bed frame against the far wall, pulling a fallen quilt partially over them. As the riders dismounted, Sarah's world narrowed to the sound of her son's breathing, the pounding of her heart, and the silhouette of the Apache warrior who stood ready to defend a white woman he barely knew and her fatherless child. The floorboards creaked as the first man stepped onto the porch. Sarah held her breath, pressing James closer to her chest, willing him to remain asleep. The baby stirred, but didn't cry, his tiny face peaceful despite the danger surrounding them. Noel moved like a shadow through the dim cabin. He positioned himself beside the door, rifle ready but not raised. His stillness was complete. A predator waiting for the precise moment to strike. A heavy fist pounded on the door. "Hello, inside. We're travelers seeking shelter from the storm." The man's voice was falsely cheerful, unconvincing even to Sarah's ears. Nahuel's eyes met Sarah's in the darkness. He shook his head slightly, a silent warning not to answer. Another voice, rougher than the first. "We know you're in there, saw the smoke from your chimney. Open up and we'll make this easy." Laughter followed, cruel and eager. Sarah's blood ran cold at the sound. She had heard men laugh like that before, soldiers passing through during the war years, eyes hollow and souls hardened by too much death. "Maybe it's just a woman," a third voice suggested. "Jenkins said the man who lived here died months back." "Even better," replied the first voice, followed by more laughter. Sarah's hands began to shake. She thought of her life before this moment, before William's death, before the isolation, before the quiet Apache who had been watching over her. She had been the daughter of a schoolteacher in Ohio, educated and sheltered. William had promised her adventure and prosperity in the West. Instead, she found hardship, loss, and now this, huddled under a bed with her infant son, while strangers with evil intentions stood at her door. The pounding came again, harder this time. "Last chance before we break it down." Nahuel moved to the window, peering through the small gap in the shutters. He gestured for Sarah to stay hidden, then whispered, "6 men. Guns." He pointed to the rear of the cabin. 2 going around back." Sarah's mind raced. The back door was barred, but the window in the storage room had a broken latch that William had never fixed. If they found it, a crash from the rear of the cabin confirmed her fears. Nahuel reacted instantly, moving toward the narrow hallway that led to the storage room. The main door shuddered under renewed assault from the men outside. "James," Nahuel whispered urgently, gesturing for her to keep the baby close and hidden. The sound of breaking glass came from the back room, followed by cursing as someone fumbled with the window frame. Nahuel raised the rifle, bracing it against his shoulder. A man appeared in the hallway, silhouetted against what little light came through the broken window behind him. He hadn't spotted Nahuel yet, his attention on adjusting to the darkness. "There's a woman's things in here," he called back to his companions. The shot from Nahuel's rifle was deafening in the confined space. The intruder crumpled without a sound. Outside, the men shouted in alarm. "Engine! There's a damn engine in there!" Someone fired blindly through the front window, splintering the wooden shutters. Sarah curled protectively around James, who woke with a startled cry. Nahuel moved swiftly back to the main room, reloading the rifle with practiced efficiency. The front door began to splinter under repeated blows. Sarah knew it wouldn't hold much longer. "Kitchen," Nahuel said, pointing to the small alcove where Sarah prepared meals. "Go." Sarah clutched James and scrambled from beneath the bed, keeping low as another shot came through the window. The kitchen offered little protection, just a heavy table and some cabinets, but it was away from the doors and windows. As she reached the relative safety of the kitchen, a terrible cracking sound announced the front door giving way. Nahuel fired again. A man screamed. Everything happened at once after that. The remaining raiders poured through the broken door. Nahuel abandoned the rifle, too slow to reload, and drew a knife from his belt. He moved with lethal grace, engaging the invaders before they could spread through the cabin. Sarah watched in horror and awe as Nahuel fought. He was outnumbered, yet he moved like water between the men, his knife finding exposed flesh with terrifying precision. But he was still one against many, and these were desperate, violent men. One of the raiders broke away from the fight, spotting Sarah in the kitchen. His face was half covered by a bandana, but his eyes gleamed with malice as he raised his pistol. Sarah turned away, shielding James with her body, waiting for the shot. It never came. Instead, there was a grunt of pain and the clatter of the gun hitting the floor. Sarah looked up to see Nahuel standing over the fallen raider, his knife dripping red in the firelight. His shirt was torn, revealing a bloody gash across his ribs, but his eyes were clear and focused. "More coming," he said grimly. "We must leave. Now." Sarah didn't hesitate. With James wailing against her chest, she grabbed her worn leather satchel hanging by the kitchen doorway and stuffed it with whatever she could reach. A thin blanket, the rabbit Nahuel had provided earlier, a small tin of matches, and a water skin. Her hands worked automatically while her mind struggled to process the violence she had just witnessed. Nahuel moved quickly to the rear window, checking the yard. "Clear," he said, then gestured for her to follow. He retrieved William's rifle and a small box of ammunition from a shelf. "My husband's journal," Sarah whispered urgently, pointing to the small desk in the corner. The leather-bound book contained not just William's thoughts, but practical information, maps, notes on the territory, contacts in nearby settlements. Nahuel grabbed it without question and tucked it inside his deerskin shirt. They slipped out through the broken back window, rain immediately soaking them to the skin. James cried louder, his tiny face scrunched in distress. Sarah tried to shield him with her body, wrapping her shawl tighter around his small form. "Horses," Nahuel said, pointing toward the small stable where Sarah kept their two remaining animals. Penny, a reliable mare that William had trained for years, and a younger gelding they had traded for last spring. As they approached the stable, Sarah froze. Two raiders were already there, attempting to saddle the nervous horses. One looked up, his face illuminated by a lantern hanging from a hook. "Hey!" he shouted, reaching for his pistol. Noel pushed Sarah behind him and raised the rifle in one fluid motion. The shot echoed across the yard. The raider fell, but his companion was already firing back. Noel pulled Sarah down behind a water trough as bullets splintered the wood around them. "Stay!" he ordered, then darted to the side, disappearing into the shadows created by the driving rain. Sarah pressed herself against the rough wood, trying to soothe James, who was now screaming in terror. She heard a shout, then the sound of a struggle. A moment later, silence fell, broken only by the constant drumming of rain. "Sarah!" Nahuel's voice came from the stable entrance. "Come." Inside, the horses were agitated but unharmed. The raiders lay motionless on the ground. Sarah averted her eyes from them, focusing instead on quickly preparing Penny for riding. She had done this countless times before, but never with such urgency, never with such cold fear spreading through her limbs. Nahuel secured the rifle to the saddle of the gelding and mounted with graceful efficiency. Sarah struggled more, trying to manage both James and herself, but finally settled into Penny's saddle, positioning James in front of her where she could hold him securely with one arm while guiding the horse with the other. "Where will we go?" she asked as they led the horses out into the storm. The rain had turned the yard into mud, making each step treacherous. "North," Nahuel replied. "My people's winter camp." He hesitated, then added, 3 days' ride." Sarah's heart sank. 3 days in this weather with a baby? But a glance back at her cabin, door broken, windows shattered, the bodies of men scattered inside and out, told her there was no choice. This place that had been her home was now a graveyard. "The others will return," Nahuel said, as if reading her thoughts. "Many others." They rowed hard for the first hour, putting distance between themselves and the cabin. The storm showed no sign of abating, and soon darkness would be complete. James had finally exhausted himself and slept fitfully against Sarah's chest, his small body warm despite the cold rain. When they reached a small copse of trees beside a swollen creek, Nahuel signaled to stop. "Rest horses," he explained. "Water rising, must cross now or wait many days." Sarah eyed the rushing water nervously. It wasn't a large creek, but the rain had transformed it into something fierce and unpredictable. "I'll go first," Nahuel said. "Follow exactly." He guided his horse into the water, testing each step carefully. Sarah watched, her throat tight with fear. Halfway across, Nahuel's horse stumbled, nearly throwing him. He recovered quickly, guiding the animal back to solid footing. Once on the other side, he dismounted and held up his hand for Sarah to wait. She sat anxiously in the rain, watching as Nahuel found a long branch and waded back into the creek, testing the depth. He was creating a safer path for her. No one had ever shown such care for her safety, not even William, who had loved her but always expected her to keep up, to be strong, to adapt quickly to frontier life. When Nahuel signaled her forward, Sarah urged Penny into the rushing water. The mare was steady, but the current pushed strongly against her legs. Sarah felt the horse struggle for purchase on the slippery creek bed. James whimpered in his sleep, sensing her tension. "Look at me!" Nahuel called over the sound of water. "Not down! At me!" Sarah raised her eyes to find his, dark and steady across the distance. She kept her gaze locked on his face as Penny fought through the current. As they neared the opposite bank, the mare's footing suddenly gave way. Sarah felt herself sliding sideways. James clutched desperately against her. She screamed, certain they would be swept away. Then Nahuel was there, strong hands gripping her arm, steadying her in the saddle, guiding Penny up onto solid ground. For a moment, as she regained her balance, Sarah found herself inches from his face. Rain streamed down his features, but his eyes were warm with relief. "Thank you," she whispered, the words inadequate for what she felt. Nahuel nodded once, then stepped back, returning to his role as guide and protector. But something had changed between them. A trust deeper than circumstances, a connection forged in danger and sealed in that brief moment of vulnerability and strength. Night fell like a heavy blanket over the sodden landscape. The rain had finally lessened to a steady drizzle, but the damage was done. Every inch of ground was soaked, every tree dripping, every path transformed into mud. Sarah's clothes clung to her body, her hair plastered against her face, and her fingers had gone numb with cold. James fussed constantly now, his discomfort impossible to soothe. "Must stop," Nahuel announced, studying the darkening sky. "Not safe to ride at night." They had reached the edge of a rocky outcropping that offered some protection from the elements. Beneath an overhang, the ground was relatively dry, not comfortable, but better than anything they had seen for hours. Sarah dismounted awkwardly, her legs stiff from riding and cold. James wailed as the movement jostled him, his little face red with frustration. Nahuel took the reins of both horses, securing them where they could graze on what little vegetation grew among the rocks. "Fire," he said, looking at Sarah and the crying baby with concern. "Need warmth." Sarah nodded gratefully. She didn't know how he would manage it. Everything around them was soaked through, but she trusted that he would find a way. That trust itself was strange, she realized. This man had been a complete stranger that morning, a member of a people she had been taught to fear, yet now she placed her life and her son's in his hands without hesitation. While Nahuel disappeared to gather materials, Sarah tried to calm James. She changed his soiled wrappings, using the last clean cloth she had managed to bring. "I'm sorry, little one," she murmured, rocking him gently. "I know you're cold and hungry and scared, but you're so brave. just like your father." The mention of William brought a familiar ache to her chest. What would he think of her situation now? Fleeing their homestead with an Apache warrior, heading toward an uncertain future among people known to settlers only through stories of conflict and bloodshed. Yet what choice did she have? Without Nahuel, she and James would likely be dead already. Nahuel returned, carrying an armful of materials. Some dry bark he had peeled from the protected side of trees, small twigs from beneath dense brush, and a bundle of some kind of plant Sarah didn't recognize. With methodical precision, he constructed a small fire pit using rocks, then began the patient work of building a fire. Sarah watched, fascinated, as he produced a small leather pouch from inside his shirt. From it, he took what appeared to be a piece of flint and a small metal striker. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, creating sparks that he carefully directed onto a nest of the strange plant fibers. They caught quickly, and he nurtured the tiny flame with gentle breath until it grew strong enough to consume the bark and twigs. Soon, a small but steady fire cast its golden light across their shelter. The warmth was immediate and welcome. Sarah moved closer, holding James toward the flames to warm his chilled body. The baby's cries subsided to whimpers, his eyes fixed on the dancing fire. "He hungry," Nahuel observed, settling back against the rock wall. In the firelight, Sarah could see the dark stain on his side where the raider had injured him. "You're hurt," she said, reaching toward him before catching herself. "Let me see." Nahuel seemed surprised by her concern but nodded, lifting the edge of his shirt to reveal a long gash across his ribs. It wasn't deep, but in these conditions any wound could turn deadly if infection set in. "I have nothing to clean it with," Sarah said helplessly. Nahuel shook his head, reaching again into his pouch. He produced some dried leaves, crushed them between his fingers, and sprinkled the powder directly onto the wound. His face remained impassive, though Sarah could only imagine the sting. "Medicine," he explained. "Stop blood, kill bad spirits in wound." As he tended to himself, Sarah turned her attention back to James. The baby was indeed hungry. It had been hours since she had last fed him. She adjusted her damp dress and positioned him to nurse, momentarily self-conscious about doing so in front of Nahuel. But the Apache warrior had turned his gaze to the fire, offering her privacy without making an obvious show of it. After James had eaten and fallen into an exhausted sleep, Sarah wrapped him in the blanket she had managed to keep relatively dry in her satchel. Her own stomach growled audibly. Without a word, Nahuel reached into his own pack and produced some dried meat and a handful of berries. He offered them to Sarah, who accepted gratefully. "Thank you," she said, the simple phrase becoming a refrain between them. "For everything." Nahuel nodded, then surprised her by asking, "Your husband, how did he die?" The question was direct, but not unkind. Sarah swallowed a piece of the tough jerky before answering. "Fever. It came suddenly, 3 months ago. One day he was fine, building a new chair for our home, and the next—" She trailed off, remembering William's flushed face, his delirious mumblings, the way his strong body had seemed to collapse in on itself over just a few terrible days. "Nothing I did helped. The nearest doctor was too far." Nahuel was quiet for a moment, then, "My wife also." Sarah looked up, startled. "Your wife died of fever." He shook his head. "Bluecoats, soldiers." His jaw tightened. "2 summers passed. They attacked our village while warriors were hunting. Killed many. My Ayana. Our son." The pain in his voice was so raw, so familiar, that Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The words were as inadequate for his loss as they had been for hers. "Why do you help us?" she asked after a long silence. "After what my people did to yours." Nahuel's dark eyes reflected the firelight as he considered her question. "You are not them," he said finally. "They are not you. The child—" He glanced at James. "He has no blame." He hesitated, then added, "When I saw you first time, you reminded me of her, fighting alone, brave." Sarah felt something shift inside her, a wall crumbling, a door opening. This man who by all rights should hate her and everything she represented had instead seen her courage, her struggle, had chosen to help rather than harm. "Your people," she began hesitantly. "Will they accept us?" Nahuel's expression grew serious. "Some yes, some no." He touched the knife at his belt. "But you, under my protection, no one will harm you." The fire crackled between them, sending sparks up toward the stone ceiling. Outside, the night creatures had begun their chorus, singing to the rhythm of the diminishing rain. "Sleep," Nahuel said gently. "Long ride tomorrow. I watch first." Sarah nodded, suddenly aware of how utterly exhausted she was. She curled around James, positioned so the fire would warm them both, and closed her eyes. The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was Nahuel's silhouette against the fire, steady and watchful, a guardian between her and the dangerous world beyond their small circle of light. Sarah woke to the soft murmuring of unfamiliar words. Opening her eyes, she found Nahuel kneeling beside the rekindled fire, his palms raised to the first grey light of dawn, filtering through the rocks. His eyes were closed, his expression serene as he chanted quietly in his native tongue. She remained still, not wanting to interrupt what was clearly a sacred moment. James stirred against her chest, making small, smacking sounds with his lips, a sure sign he would soon wake hungry. The movement caught Nahuel's attention, and he finished his prayer before turning to them. "Morning comes," he said simply. "Storm past." Sarah sat up, wincing at the stiffness in her muscles. Everything ached from yesterday's hard ride, and her clothes were still damp despite sleeping near the fire. She adjusted her position to feed James, who had indeed awakened with a demanding cry. "What were you saying?" she asked, nodding toward where Nahuel had been kneeling. "Your prayer." He seemed surprised by her interest. "Thanks to Creator for new day, protection for journey." He paused, then added, "Asked blessing for you and small one." Sarah felt unexpectedly moved. "Thank you," she said softly. "My father was a religious man. He taught me to pray every night, but since William died..." She trailed off, remembering how she had raged at God, questioned his purpose, finally fallen into a numb silence where prayers no longer seemed to matter. Nahuel nodded, understanding in his eyes. Hard to speak to spirits when heart is wounded. He gestured to the brightening sky. But they listen, even when we are quiet. They broke camp efficiently, sharing the last of Nahuel's dried meat for breakfast. As Sarah mounted Penny, settling James in his sling against her body, she realized she had no idea where exactly they were heading or what awaited them there. "Tell me about your people," she said, as they rode side by side across a meadow glistening with morning dew. "Where are we going?" Nahuel considered her question, perhaps weighing how much to share. "Winter camp in High Valley, protected by mountains. Soldiers cannot find easily." He pointed north toward distant peaks. "My band is small now. Many died in wars, sickness, perhaps 40 people, 10 warriors." "And who leads them?" Sarah asked. "My father, Chief Kitchi," Nahuel replied, a note of pride in his voice. "Wise man, has seen 60 winters." Sarah tried to imagine what reception awaited her, a white woman in an Apache camp. Would they see her as an enemy, a burden, or something else entirely? As if sensing her thoughts, Nahuel added, "Father respects courage. You have this." He glanced at James. "Child carriers are sacred to my people. No one will harm mother who nurses baby." The terrain grew more challenging as the day progressed. They traveled upward into foothills, following game trails through increasingly dense forest. When they stopped at midday beside a clear stream, Nahuel showed Sarah which plants were safe to eat. Tender shoots that tasted like young peas, roots with a starchy sweetness, berries that stained her fingers purple. "My mother taught me these," he explained, demonstrating how to dig the roots without damaging the plant. "She was medicine woman of our band." "Is she still alive?" Sarah asked, washing the roots in the stream. Nahuel's face darkened. "No, smallpox, many winters past." "I'm sorry," Sarah said, the phrase becoming a familiar exchange between them, an acknowledgement of shared grief. As they continued their journey that afternoon, Sarah noticed Nahuel becoming increasingly alert, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. Several times he stopped abruptly, listening to sounds she couldn't detect, studying tracks she would have missed entirely. "What is it?" she finally asked, after he dismounted to examine something on the ground. "Horses passed here, many." He pointed to indentations in the soft earth. "Soldiers, yesterday." Fear clutched at Sarah's heart. "Looking for us." Nahuel shook his head. "Not yet. Raiders not had time to report." His expression was grim nonetheless. "But soldiers patrol borders of reservation, hunt my people who refuse to surrender." Sarah knew about the reservations, restricted lands where the government was forcing native tribes to relocate. William had spoken of them as a solution to the Indian problem, a way to free up valuable territory for settlement. She had accepted his view without question then. Now, looking at Nahuel, she saw the human cost of such policies with painful clarity. "Your band refuses to go to the reservation," she stated, understanding now why they hid in remote mountain valleys. "Would you cage yourself willingly?" Nahuel asked, his voice quiet but intense. "Watch your child starve on government rations? Die of white man's diseases?" He shook his head. "Better to live free, even hunted." They adjusted their route, Nahuel leading them on a steeper, less visible path to avoid any chance of encountering the patrol. The horses struggled on the rough terrain, and Sarah's arms ached from holding James secure while navigating the difficult trail. Late in the afternoon, they reached a ridge overlooking a vast expanse of wilderness. In the distance, the mountain peaks Nahuel had pointed to that morning now seemed closer, their snow-capped summits catching the golden light of the lowering sun. "Tomorrow," Nahuel said, pointing toward those mountains. "We reach my people tomorrow." Sarah nodded, a strange mixture of anticipation and anxiety filling her. What would tomorrow bring? What new life awaited her and James among people who had every reason to reject them? As if reading her concerns, Nahuel turned to her, his face solemn but kind. "No fear," he said simply. "I bring you, I protect you." It wasn't just a promise, Sarah realized. It was a commitment, one that defied the bloody history between their peoples, the prejudices she had been raised with, the divisions that had seemed immutable just days ago. In Nahuel's eyes, she saw not an Apache warrior or a savage, labels that white settlers casually applied, but a man of honor whose word, once given, was unbreakable. "I trust you," she replied, and was surprised to discover how completely she meant it. The sun was high when they crested the final ridge overlooking the valley. Sarah drew Penny to a halt beside Nahuel, breathless at the sight below. Nestled between protective mountain slopes lay a hidden world, a cluster of conical dwellings arranged in a loose circle around a central clearing. Thin wisps of smoke rose from several of the structures, and figures moved about the camp, engaged in the ordinary business of living. "Your home," Sarah whispered, the reality of where she was going suddenly striking her full force. Nahuel nodded, eyes scanning the encampment with evident relief. "Wickiups," he said, pointing to the dome-shaped structures. "Winter homes." As they watched, a child below spotted them on the ridge and shouted, pointing upward. Activity in the camp instantly changed. Women gathered children, men reached for weapons, faces turned toward the potential threat. Then someone recognized Nahuel and called out. A ripple of movement spread through the camp. "They see us," Nahuel said unnecessarily. "Ready?" Sarah's throat was dry, her heart hammering against her ribs. She adjusted James in his sling and nodded, though she felt anything but ready. They descended slowly, giving the camp plenty of time to prepare for their arrival. By the time they reached level ground, a delegation had formed at the edge of the settlement. Several men with Nahuel's bearing but older, a few younger warriors with wary expressions, and standing slightly ahead, a dignified elder whose long grey hair was adorned with eagle feathers. Chief Kitchi, Sarah realized, recognizing the same proud bearing she had observed in Nahuel. The silence as they approached was absolute. Sarah felt dozens of eyes on her, curious, suspicious, hostile, questioning. She kept her back straight, her eyes forward, drawing on reserves of courage she hadn't known she possessed. Nahuel dismounted first, approaching his father with respectful gestures. He spoke rapidly in Apache, occasionally glancing back at Sarah. The chief's expression remained impassive, though his dark eyes, so like his son's, moved between Nahuel, Sarah, and the baby. After several minutes, Nahuel turned and motioned for Sarah to dismount. Awkwardly, still sore from 2 days of hard riding, she slid from Penny's back, steadying James against her chest as she approached the gathering. "My father welcomes you," Nahuel said, though the chief's stern expression hardly seemed welcoming to Sarah's eyes. "Says you and child may rest here while council decides." "Decides what?" Sarah wanted to ask, but held her tongue. She inclined her head to the chief, hoping the gesture conveyed proper respect. "Thank you for your hospitality, Chief Kitchi," she said, knowing Nahuel would translate, "My son and I are grateful." As Nahuel relayed her words, a tall woman emerged from the crowd. She was perhaps 40, with sharp features and a direct gaze that evaluated Sarah without pretense. She wore a beautifully beaded dress and carried herself with unmistakable authority. "My aunt, Nasha," Nahuel explained quietly, "elder of Women's Council." Nasha approached Sarah and without preamble reached for James. Every instinct in Sarah's body screamed to protect her child, to pull away, to refuse. But she understood this was a test, perhaps the first of many. Forcing herself to remain calm, she carefully transferred James to the woman's waiting arms. Nasha examined the baby with expert eyes, unwrapping his coverings, checking his limbs, peering into his face. James surprisingly didn't cry, but stared back at the strange woman with wide blue eyes. "Strong boy," Nasha declared in heavily accented English, a hint of approval in her voice. "Hungry, needs clean wrappings." She handed James back to Sarah, then turned to speak to the chief. A discussion followed, with several people speaking at once. Sarah couldn't understand the words, but the tone was clear. Disagreement, concern, perhaps even anger from some. Finally, Chief Kitchi raised his hand, and silence fell. He spoke a few decisive words, and the tension in the group visibly lessened. "Come," Nahuel said to Sarah, "you will stay in my sister's wiki-up. She has young ones also." As they moved through the camp, Sarah felt the weight of stares following them. Children peered from behind their mothers, some pointing openly at her pale skin and light brown hair. One small boy ran alongside them for several steps, reaching out to touch her skirt before being called back sharply by an elder. Nahuel led her to a dwelling slightly apart from the others. A young woman stood outside, perhaps a few years younger than Sarah, with a round face and kind eyes. A toddler clung to her leg, hiding his face. "My sister Talise," Nahuel said. "Her husband died fighting soldiers last summer." Talise didn't smile, but she nodded to Sarah and held open the entrance flap of the wiki-up. Inside, it was surprisingly spacious and warm. A small fire burned in a central pit, its smoke rising to escape through a hole in the top of the structure. Bedding of soft furs, was arranged around the perimeter, and various household items hung from the framework or sat neatly organized against the walls. "You sleep here?" Talise said, her English better than Sarah had expected. She pointed to a space on one side of the dwelling. "I help with baby." She made a rocking motion with her arms. "Thank you," Sarah said, relief washing over her. The simple kindness in the woman's gesture, after so much tension, brought tears to her eyes that she quickly blinked away. Nahuel remained at the entrance. "I must speak with counsel," he explained. "Explain everything. Stay here until I return." After he left, Talise helped Sarah change James, providing soft, clean cloths for wrapping and a warm herbal wash for his skin. The Apache woman's hands were gentle and practiced, and she made soothing sounds to James that needed no translation. "Your son," Sarah said, gesturing to the toddler who now sat watching them with solemn eyes. "What is his name?" "Tarak," Talise replied. "It means star in our language." She smiled for the first time, a warm expression that transformed her face. "Your son's name?" "James," Sarah said, returning the smile hesitantly. Talise nodded, then surprised Sarah by asking, "Are you afraid here?" Sarah considered the question, wanting to be honest. "Yes," she admitted, "but less now, talking with you." Talise seemed to appreciate her candor. "Some here are angry you came. Think all white people are enemies." She rocked James gently. "But my brother says you have strong heart, and child needs mother." She touched her own chest. "I understand this." Outside the wiki-up, voices were raised in what sounded like heated debate. Sarah glanced nervously toward the entrance. "Council decides," Talise explained. "If you stay or go." "And your brother?" Sarah asked. "What happens to him for bringing me here?" Talise's expression grew serious. "Some say he betrays our people. Others respect that he honors life, even white woman's." She met Sarah's eyes directly. "What do you think? Why does my brother risk so much for you?" It was a question Sarah had asked herself repeatedly over the past 2 days. "I don't know," she answered truthfully, "but I owe him everything." Talise studied her for a long moment, then nodded as if satisfied with what she saw. "Rest now," she said. "Later we will know what path Creator has chosen for you." Sarah must have dozed off, exhaustion finally claiming her despite the strangeness of her surroundings. She awoke to Talise gently shaking her shoulder. James was no longer beside her, and for a heart-stopping moment, panic seized her. "Your son sleeps there," Talise said quickly, pointing to a small cradle-like structure woven from reeds and lined with soft rabbit fur. James lay peacefully inside, wrapped in clean cloths, his tiny fists occasionally twitching in sleep. "The council has decided," Talise continued, her expression giving nothing away. "They call for you now." Sarah smoothed her hair and straightened her filthy dress as best she could, wishing desperately for clean clothes and a moment to compose herself. But there was no time. Outside, the last rays of sunlight stretched across the camp, and people had gathered in the central clearing. A large fire burned at the center, around which sat the elders of the tribe, including Chief Kitchi. Nahuel stood to one side, his face unreadable in the flickering light. Talise guided Sarah forward, carrying James in his reed cradle. The crowd parted silently to let them through. Sarah felt every eye upon her, measuring, judging. She held her head high, though her legs trembled beneath her skirt. Chief Kitchi spoke first, his deep voice rising and falling in the rhythms of the Apache language. When he finished, Nahuel stepped forward to translate. "My father says you stand before us, a woman of the people who have hunted ours like animals, who have stolen our lands, who have broken every treaty." Nahuel's voice was steady, simply conveying the chief's words without emotion. "He asks why we should shelter you when your soldiers would kill us, when your settlers would take what little we have left." Sarah swallowed hard. It wasn't just her fate being decided, but James's as well. She looked directly at Chief Kitchi, trying to find words that would bridge the vast chasm between their worlds. "I cannot defend what my people have done to yours," she began, Nahuel translating as she spoke. "I cannot change the past or erase the blood that has been spilled. I can only stand before you as a mother who wants her son to live, as a woman who has lost everything but him." She paused, gathering courage. "Your son saved us when he had every reason to turn away. He saw us not as enemies, but as people in need. If you can see us the same way, we will work to earn our place here and never bring harm to your people." Murmurs rose from the gathered Apaches as Nahuel translated her words. An older man with a deeply lined face stood and spoke passionately, gesturing towards Sarah with obvious displeasure. Others joined in, voices rising in what seemed to be disagreement. Finally, Nasha, Nahuel's aunt, rose to her feet. Her authoritative presence silenced the others immediately. She spoke at length, occasionally pointing to James in his cradle, other times gesturing to the mountains surrounding them. When she finished, she looked directly at Sarah, and though her expression remained stern, there was something like respect in her gaze. Chief Kitchi listened to all who spoke, his weathered face revealing nothing of his thoughts. When the voices had quieted, he stood slowly, leaning slightly on a staff adorned with eagle feathers and colored beads. He spoke only a few words, but they carried the weight of final judgment. The camp was silent for a long moment after he finished. Then Nahuel turned to Sarah. "You and your son may stay until the spring thaw," he translated. "You will learn our ways, help with women's work, harm no one. When warm weather returns, the council will decide if you may remain longer or must go elsewhere." Relief flooded through Sarah, making her knees weak. A temporary reprieve, but one that would see them through the harsh winter months ahead. "What of you?" she asked Nahuel quietly. "What did they decide about you?" A shadow crossed his face. "I must prove my loyalty, take extra hunting duties, stand watch at night." He shrugged slightly. "Small price." After the council dispersed, Talise led Sarah back to the wickiup, where a simple meal of stewed meat and wild roots awaited them. Other women stopped by, some openly curious, others more reserved, all wanting to glimpse the white woman and her baby. A few brought small gifts, a carved wooden toy, a pair of soft moccasins that might fit James when he was a little older, a pot of salve for chapped skin. Sarah accepted each with genuine gratitude, recognizing the gestures for what they were, tentative bridges across a divide of suspicion and fear. Days passed, falling into a rhythm unlike anything Sarah had known before. She rose with the women of the camp before dawn, learned to build fires in the Apache way, quickly, efficiently, with minimal smoke. She helped prepare morning meals, watched how the others cared for their children, tried to absorb the flow of life around her. Talise proved a patient teacher, showing Sarah how to scrape hides for tanning, how to weave the sturdy baskets used for everything from gathering to storage, how to identify plants with medicinal properties. Sarah's hands, once soft despite her frontier life, grew calloused and strong. Her skin darkened from constant exposure to the outdoors, and her movements began to adopt some of the fluid grace she observed in the Apache women. James thrived in the camp environment. Other mothers took turns holding him, singing to him, allowing Sarah brief periods of respite. The children were fascinated by his pale skin and blue eyes, often gathering around to touch his face or stroke his light brown hair. He began to respond to their attention, smiling and cooing in a way that transcended any language barrier. Nahuel was often absent, fulfilling his duties to prove himself to the council. When he did appear in camp, Sarah was acutely aware of his presence. He would check on her and James briefly, sometimes bringing small gifts, a particularly sweet root, a piece of jerky, once a comb carved from antler. Their conversations were short, practical, yet Sarah found herself looking forward to each one with an anticipation she tried to dismiss as mere gratitude. 2 weeks after their arrival, Sarah sat outside Talice's wickiup, working on a pair of moccasins under the other woman's guidance. Her stitches were still clumsy compared to Talice's fine, even work, but she was improving. James and Tarek played nearby, the toddler gently patting the baby's stomach while James grabbed at his fingers. Shouting from the edge of camp drew their attention. 3 young warriors had returned from a hunting patrol, but instead of game, they carried urgent news. They spoke rapidly to the gathering crowd, pointing toward the eastern horizon. Talice's face grew serious as she listened. "Bluecoats," she told Sarah. "Soldiers coming this way, many of them." Sarah's blood ran cold. "Looking for me? Maybe. Or just hunting our people." Talise stood, gathering Tarek into her arms. "Come, we must prepare." The camp exploded into activity. Women packed essential items, men gathered weapons, children were hushed and kept close. Sarah returned to the wickiup, clutching James to her chest, her mind racing. Had the raiders from her cabin reported her disappearance? Were the soldiers specifically searching for her? Or was this just another patrol targeting the Apaches who refused reservation life? Nahuel appeared at the entrance, his face grave. "You must hide," he said without preamble. "All women and children going to caves in high rocks, safer there." "What about you?" Sarah asked, already knowing the answer. "I stay, with warriors, watch soldiers, lead them away if needed." His eyes held hers for a long moment. "If something happens to me, my sister will guide you to safety when time is right." "No," Sarah said, surprising herself with her vehemence. "I won't leave you behind, not after everything you've done for us." Nahuel's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Not your choice, Sarah Mitchell." He reached out, hesitated, then gently touched James's head. "Protect him. That is your duty." Before she could respond, he turned to leave. Acting on impulse, Sarah caught his arm. When he looked back, she stood on tiptoe and pressed a quick, fierce kiss to his cheek. "Be careful," she whispered. "Please." Something flashed in Nahuel's eyes. Surprise, warmth, perhaps something deeper. He nodded once, then was gone, striding across the camp to join the other warriors. Talise, who had witnessed the exchange, said nothing, but her knowing gaze made Sarah flush with embarrassment and confusion. There was no time to dwell on the moment, however. Within minutes, they were heading toward the rocky slopes above the camp, James secured to Sarah's back, a small bundle of necessities clutched in her hands. As they climbed higher, Sarah looked back at the camp below. The wickiup stood peaceful in the afternoon sun, smoke rising from cooking fires as if nothing was amiss. But the warriors were already moving into position, concealing themselves among the trees at the valley's edge. Nahuel stood apart for a moment, looking up toward the escaping women and children. Though distance made his features indistinct, Sarah knew he was watching her. She raised her hand in a small gesture of farewell, praying it wouldn't be their last. The cave was larger than it appeared from outside, extending deep into the mountainside. Inside, women tended small, carefully shielded fires that provided minimal light and warmth without creating detectable smoke. Children huddled close to their mothers, unusually quiet, sensing the gravity of the situation. Sarah sat between Talise and an elderly woman named Kimmy, who had shown unexpected kindness to her over the past weeks, teaching her Apache words with remarkable patience. "How long will we stay here?" Sarah whispered to Talise. "Until warriors signal safe," Talise replied, her eyes constantly moving to the cave entrance where 2 young women stood watch. "Maybe one day, maybe more." James slept peacefully in his reed cradle, oblivious to the tension surrounding him. Sarah envied his innocence, his ability to rest, while her own mind raced with terrible possibilities. What if the soldiers discovered the camp? What if Nahuel was captured or killed? What would become of her and James then? Kimmy noticed her distress and patted her hand with gnarled fingers. "No fear," she said in halting English. "Great Spirit watches." Hours passed in uneasy waiting. Some women worked silently on small crafts, weaving, beading, mending, their hands needing occupation even in crisis. Others dozed fitfully or nursed infants. Occasionally, one of the sentries would step outside to scan the valley below, returning with terse updates in Apache that Sarah couldn't understand. As night fell, the atmosphere in the cave grew more oppressive. Cold seeped through the rock, and the limited fires provided little comfort. Sarah wrapped her blanket tighter around herself and James, who had begun to fuss. His cries, though muffled against her chest, seemed thunderously loud in the tense quiet. "Sing to him," Talise suggested. "Child needs mother's voice." Sarah hesitated, then began a lullaby her own mother had sung, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird." As she sang, other women looked up, their faces softened by the gentle melody. Even those who couldn't understand the English words seemed to appreciate the universal language of a mother soothing her child. James quieted, his blue eyes fixed on her face in the dim firelight. When she finished, Kimmy nodded approvingly. "Good song, strong heart." She pointed to Sarah's chest. "You have warrior spirit." Sarah wasn't sure about that. She'd never considered herself particularly brave. She had simply done what was necessary to survive, to protect James. Wasn't that what any mother would do? A sudden commotion at the cave entrance interrupted her thoughts. One of the sentries had returned, speaking rapidly. Women began gathering children and belongings. "What's happening?" Sarah asked, alarmed by the urgent activity. Talise's face was grim. "Soldiers found lower camp. We must go deeper into mountains." Sarah's heart sank. "The men? Nahuel?" "No word," Talise said, already packing her few belongings. "Come, quickly." They moved in single file through the darkness, the women who knew the path leading, others following close behind. Sarah carried James against her chest, one hand on Talise's shoulder for guidance. The terrain was treacherous, narrow ledges, loose stones, steep inclines, made worse by the near-total darkness. Only occasional whispers passed between them, directions or warnings about particularly dangerous spots. They had been traveling for perhaps an hour when Sarah heard it, distant gunfire echoing through the canyons. She froze, her blood turning to ice. The women around her stopped as well, listening intently to the sporadic shots. A child whimpered somewhere in the line, quickly hushed by its mother. "Keep moving!" came the fierce whisper from the front, passed back along the line. "Must reach Upper Valley before dawn." Sarah forced her legs to continue, though each step felt heavier than the last. The gunfire had stopped, leaving only questions in its wake. Who had fired? Who had been hit? Was Nahuel among those defending the camp, or had he somehow evaded the confrontation? By the time they reached their destination, another, smaller cave high in the mountainside, exhaustion had replaced fear as Sarah's dominant emotion. She collapsed onto the cave floor beside Talise, cradling James, who had somehow slept through much of their flight. "Rest now," Talise said, arranging a blanket over them both. "I watch first." Despite her fatigue, sleep eluded Sarah. Her mind replayed the events that had brought her here. William's death, the raiders at her cabin, Nahuel's unexpected mercy, their dangerous journey, and now this new threat. How had her life changed so dramatically in so short a time? And what future could she possibly envision for herself and James among these people, hunted by her own kind? Dawn was breaking when a soft signal at the cave entrance roused the women from their uneasy rest. A young warrior appeared, speaking quickly to the eldest woman present. A ripple of reaction spread through the group. Relief on some faces, grief on others. "What news?" Sarah asked Talise anxiously. "Soldiers gone," Talise replied, her expression carefully controlled. "Burned some wiki-ups, but most hidden in time. 3 warriors wounded. One," she hesitated, "one not returning." "Who?" Sarah could barely form the word, dreading the answer. "Helaku, young warrior, cousin to my husband." Talise's eyes filled with tears, though her voice remained steady. "He died protecting our people." Sarah felt a complex mixture of grief for the fallen warrior and selfish relief that it wasn't Nahuel. The guilt of that relief added to the weight on her heart. "And your brother?" she finally asked. "Wounded but alive. He led soldiers away from camp into canyon where they became lost." Pride colored Talise's voice. "Very brave, very foolish." They began their journey back to the main camp around midday, moving cautiously despite assurances that the soldiers had retreated toward the fort to the east. The women maintained vigilant silence, still wary of lingering danger. As they descended into the valley, Sarah could see smoke rising from the camp. Not the normal cooking fires, but the smoldering remains of several wiki-ups. Warriors stood guard at the perimeter, while others helped rebuild damaged structures. Children who had remained with the elderly or infirm ran to greet returning mothers, their relieved cries breaking the unnatural quiet. Sarah searched the busy camp for Nahuel, her eyes scanning each figure anxiously. Talise touched her arm, pointing toward a wiki-up on the far side that Sarah recognized as belonging to the medicine man, Askuk. "There," Talise said, "being treated." Sarah hesitated, uncertain of her place. Would her presence be welcome, or would it seem presumptuous for her to seek him out? Talise seemed to understand her dilemma. "Go," she urged gently. "He asked for you before I left." Heart pounding, Sarah approached the medicine man's dwelling. She paused outside, James sleeping against her shoulder, and called softly, "Nahuel?" Askuk appeared at the entrance, his ancient face solemn as he regarded her. After a moment's consideration, he nodded and held back the flap for her to enter. Inside, Nahuel lay on a bed of furs, his upper body bare except for bandages wrapped around his left shoulder and chest. His face was drawn with pain, but his eyes brightened when he saw her. "Sarah," he said, attempting to sit up before wincing and settling back. "James, you are safe." "Yes," she said, kneeling beside him, relief making her voice unsteady. "And you are alive, though it seems you tried very hard not to be." A faint smile touched his lips. "Had to lead them away, protect the people." His gaze intensified. "Protect you." Sarah's throat tightened with emotion. Without thinking, she reached out to touch his hand, her fingers curling around his. "Thank you," she whispered. "But please don't risk yourself for us again. James needs..." She hesitated, then finished softly, "We need you alive." Something shifted in Nahuel's expression, a softening, a warmth that transformed his features despite the pain and exhaustion. His hand turned beneath hers, their palms meeting, fingers interlacing. Askuk made a gruff sound behind them, muttering something in Apache that made Nahuel's cheeks darken slightly. "He says I should rest," Nahuel translated, though Sarah suspected there was more to the old man's comment, "and that you should help prepare burial ceremony for Helaku. Great honor to be asked." Sarah nodded, understanding the significance. To be included in such an important ritual meant acceptance, at least from some in the community. "I will do whatever is needed," she promised. As she rose to leave, Nahuel tightened his grip on her hand momentarily. "Sarah," he said, switching to Apache and speaking too rapidly for her to follow. When he finished, he looked at her expectantly, "I'm sorry," she said, confused. "I didn't understand." Nahuel's smile returned, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Not yet," he said, "but someday you will." Winter yielded slowly to spring in the mountain valley, snow retreating up the slopes as the days gradually lengthened. 3 months had passed since the soldier attack, months in which Sarah had become more deeply woven into the fabric of Apache life. Her hands now moved confidently through daily tasks, grinding corn, tanning hides, weaving baskets tight enough to carry water. Her ears had grown accustomed to the rhythms of the Apache language, and simple conversations no longer required translation. James, now 7 months old, thrived in the open air and communal care of the camp. He had begun to crawl, chasing after Tarek and the other children with determined energy. His first word had been Ama, the Apache word for mother, followed closely by Na, his attempt at Nahuel's name. The women laughed and called him Little Warrior for his fierce determination. Nahuel had recovered from his wound, though on cold mornings, Sarah noticed him favoring his left arm. They spent more time together now, not just in passing moments, but in deliberate companionship. He taught her to track game, to read the weather in cloud patterns, to find north without stars. She shared stories from her childhood, sang songs from Ohio, taught him to write his name in English letters. Something was growing between them, something neither had put into words. The community saw it clearly enough. The way Nahuel's eyes followed Sarah across the camp, how her face brightened when he returned from hunting. Children giggled when they walked together. Elders exchanged knowing glances. But as the snow melted, anxiety returned to Sarah's heart. The council's decision about her future loomed with the approaching spring. Would she and James be sent away now that travel was becoming possible again? Where would they go? The thought of returning to white settlements, of trying to explain where she had been, filled her with dread. Yet remaining meant Nahuel would continue bearing the burden of having brought her here. On a clear morning in early April, Sarah sat outside Talise's wickiup, now as much hers as her friends', soaking in the warm sunshine as she beaded a small pouch. Her fingers moved deftly, creating patterns she had learned from Kimi. James played nearby, stacking and knocking over small wooden blocks Nahuel had carved for him. "Your hands speak Apache now," came Nasha's voice. The older woman stood watching her work, her expression appraising but not unkind. "Thank you," Sarah replied in the Apache language, her accent still noticeable, but her words clear. "Your people have taught me much." Nasha nodded, settling beside her on the ground with a grace that belied her age. "Council meets tonight," she said without preamble, "to decide about you and the child." Sarah's hands stilled. "I know." "My brother thinks you should go," Nasha continued, her directness typical of Apache conversation. "He says the soldiers will return, searching for the white woman who lives with savages. He fears for the safety of the band." Sarah had suspected as much. Chief Kitchi's tolerance of her presence had never warmed to acceptance. "And what do you think, Nasha?" she asked, meeting the older woman's penetrating gaze. Nasha was silent for a long moment. "I think my nephew's heart would break if you left," she said finally, "and I think you have earned a place here." She gestured to the beadwork in Sarah's hands. "Not just with these skills, but with your courage. You face the world as an Apache woman now, not hiding behind men's protection." Hope flickered in Sarah's chest, though she tried to temper it. "The decision is not yours alone to make." "No," Nasha agreed, "but the Women's Council has strong voice, and we have watched you care for your son, work without complaint, learn our ways." Her weathered hand touched Sarah's arm briefly. "You have mother's hands, sister's heart. This matters." When Nasha had gone, Sarah sat in stunned silence, turning the woman's words over in her mind. From Nasha, such statements were high praise indeed. As afternoon faded toward evening, Nahuel appeared at the edge of camp. He had been hunting since dawn, but his hands were empty as he approached. His expression was serious, his steps deliberate. "Walk with me?" he asked, glancing at Talise, who nodded and motioned that she would watch James. They followed a narrow trail up into the foothills, neither speaking, until they reached a small mesa overlooking the valley. The camp below looked peaceful, smoke rising from cooking fires, children playing in the central clearing. Beyond, the forests and mountains stretched to the horizon, wild and untamed. "Council meets soon," Nahuel said, breaking the silence. "I know." Sarah hugged herself against the cool evening breeze. "Nasha told me." Nahuel nodded, his eyes on the distant mountains. "I have been thinking about what happens if they say you must leave." Sarah's heart contracted painfully. "And?" He turned to her then, his dark eyes intense. "I would go with you." The simple declaration took her breath away. "Nahuel, no. This is your home, your people. You can't leave them for us." "Cannot stay without you," he replied, as if it were the most obvious truth in the world. "Not anymore." Sarah felt tears burning behind her eyes. "Where would we even go? I can't return to white settlements with an Apache man. They would..." She couldn't finish the thought, the possibilities too terrible to voice. Canada, perhaps, or Mexico, places where people of different blood live together. He took her hands in his. "Sarah Mitchell, I have known since finding you in the storm that Great Spirit sent you to me, not to replace what I lost, but to begin something new." A tear slipped down Sarah's cheek. "I'm afraid," she admitted, "afraid of the council's decision, afraid of leaving, afraid of staying and bringing more danger to your people. My father says fear is good teacher if we listen well." Nahuel's thumb brushed the tear from her face. "What does your fear teach you?" Sarah considered the question, looking deep into herself for the first time in months. "That I'm not the same woman who left that cabin, that I've found something here I never had before, not just safety but belonging." She met his gaze steadily. "That I can't imagine my life without you in it." Nahuel's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, asking rather than demanding, and Sarah answered by sliding her arms around his neck, drawing him closer. When they finally parted, Nahuel rested his forehead against hers. "Whatever council decides, we face together," he promised. The sun was setting as they returned to camp, painting the sky in brilliant orange and purple. The council had already gathered in the central clearing, elders seated in a circle, other tribal members standing respectfully behind them. Sarah felt every eye turn to her and Nahuel as they approached, their joined hands making a statement no one could misinterpret. Chief Kitchi's face revealed nothing as he motioned for them to come forward. Sarah stood tall beside Nahuel, no longer the frightened widow who had trembled at her first sight of an Apache warrior. The chief spoke at length in Apache, too quickly and with too many unfamiliar words for Sarah to follow completely. She caught phrases about tradition, about safety, about change coming whether they wished it or not. Others spoke after him. Some she recognized as supporters, others clearly opposed to her presence. Nasha delivered a passionate speech that drew murmurs of agreement from many of the women. Finally, Chief Kitchi raised his hand for silence. He looked at Sarah directly, his weathered face solemn. "Sarah Mitchell," he said in careful English, surprising her with his use of her language. "My son brings you to us in storm. Now spring comes. Council has decided." Sarah held her breath, feeling Nahuel's hand tighten around hers. "You and child stay," the chief pronounced. "Become Apache. Learn all ways, not just some. Speak our words, follow our path." His eyes, so like his son's, held hers steadily. "My son chooses you. If you choose him, you are no longer white woman, you are one of us." Relief and joy surged through Sarah so powerfully she felt lightheaded. She managed to bow her head respectfully, as she had seen others do. "Thank you, Chief Kitchi," she said in Apache. "I choose your son and your people with all my heart." A murmur of approval rippled through the gathered tribe. Even those who had opposed her staying seemed to accept the decision with typical Apache stoicism. As the council dispersed, Nahuel led Sarah to where Talise waited with James. The baby reached for his mother with a happy gurgle, then stretched his other arm toward Nahuel, clearly wanting to be held by both of them at once. Laughing, Nahuel stepped closer, creating a small circle of embrace that included all three. "Family," Talise said with satisfaction, nodding at the sight they made together. That night, as stars appeared in the vast sky above the valley, Sarah sat with Nahuel outside his wickiup, soon to be theirs, according to Apache custom. James slept peacefully inside on a bed of soft furs, exhausted from the excitement of the day. "I need to know what you said to me," Sarah remembered suddenly. "That day, in the medicine man's wickiup after the soldiers came, you spoke in Apache and said I would understand someday." Nahuel smiled, taking her hand. "I said, 'My heart walks outside my body when you are away from me.'" Sarah leaned against his shoulder, content in a way she had never imagined possible. "I understand now," she whispered. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one. Sarah knew their life would not be easy. The world beyond their valley was changing, with ever-increasing pressure on native lands and ways of life. Soldiers would come again. Settlers would push farther into the wilderness. The future held no guarantees. But tonight, in this moment, she had found her place. Not in the cabin William had built, or in the Ohio town of her birth, but here, beside a man who had once been a stranger from an enemy people, now the keeper of her heart. James would grow up between two worlds, carrying both within him, perhaps a bridge between peoples who had known too much hatred and too little understanding. "Look," Nahuel said softly, pointing to the eastern horizon where the full moon was just beginning to rise, casting silver light across the valley. "New moon, new beginning." Sarah nodded, feeling the truth of his words settle into her bones. The path ahead might be uncertain, but they would walk it together, step by step, day by day, creating their own story in a land where such tales were rarely told, yet desperately needed.